Hey guys, Free Play Frank. Today I've got part 3 of the CMC lathe restoration project for you. Then I'm going to play a groovy song from 1972, Sooner or Later by the Grassroots. Now my shout out tonight goes to Blondihacks. Now she's a female machinist, and she has a miniature machine shop in her home, and she makes all kinds of really cool projects. And she made a steam engine, and she shows you how to do all kinds of machining, and she's pretty well schooled on it. She knows all the terms and everything, and great channel if you're into machining. Make sure to check her out. Alright, let's get to it. Okay, we took the headstock apart again because I have to shim the bearings, install a thrust plate, and install the belt. As you can see, I have some pretty visitors here, so let's give them their food. Come on, darlings. Here we go. Go on, have your food, sweethearts. See, the brown and white one is Princess, because everybody should have a princess around. She's mine. Enjoy your food, ladies. Okay, back to the work. Now here's got the spindle hanging from the engine hoist because I need to measure the shaft. I've already done that. I've already measured the shaft, so here's the measurements. And this is the one closest to the chuck, and this is the rear bearing, and you can see that 3 inches and 617 thou is what the shaft measures, and 3 inches and 604 thou is what the bearing measures. Now I ended up getting another 4 thou because I cleaned up the scratches on the inside of the bearing with some emery cloth. So we've got about less than 20 thou there to play with. 15 thou roughly, 14 thou. The outboard bearing is an inch smaller, so you can see that there's 4 thou difference between the shaft and the bore on the rear bearing. So I'm going to leave that. That should be fine for a 2 5/8 inch bearing. And now here's the Shim Stock. These pieces of galvanized tin are about 17 thou thick. So I'm going to loosen these off, and I'll sandwich these in there and then tighten it down again and remeasure it. And you can see that the bearings aren't exactly square. They're, it's a 80-year-old machine, so I cleaned it up the best I could to remove the scratches with emery cloth, and I managed to get a couple more thou clearance after the high parts were gone. And this is the thrust plate. This piece here is a cast iron ring that slides onto the main shaft behind the pulley block, those 3 pulleys where the belt drives it. And I cleaned this up on the lathe. It was pretty nasty grooves ground into it. And then this rides on here and rides up against this. But you can see this is worn pretty bad here. So, there's not really any way that I can clean that up. I don't have a milling machine. I'm not gonna try and take these bearings out of their housings. I'm not sure how they're installed, whether they were poured in hot or whether they were just pressed in. So I'm just gonna go with it like this. And I've already measured the thickness when this was together with a telescoping gauge in here and figured out how much difference I had to make. And I found some aluminum plate, cut the circles out as close as I could, and then glued it onto the steel with construction adhesive and machined it down on the lathe till it was the right thickness. So the reason I didn't go with aluminized bronze is because the bearings are bronze, so it's supposed to be dissimilar materials. And you can see what happened to the original one. It was completely ground down to nothing. There was nothing left on this. It was steel on steel, and there was about 50 thou of clearance in the shaft end plate, so that's not going to work. So we're going to install these pieces in between the two halves of these bearing shells, and then I'll measure it and we'll see what that comes out at. It's done. You can see I had to make it out of two thicknesses of metal. I started out with this gray metal here, and this piece was about 17 thousandths of an inch thick, so I made shims out of that first and then torqued the cap down and measured it, and it was about 5 thou too tight still. So I found another piece that was 10 thou thick. This sheet metal here is 10 thousandths thick, so I made two shims. And the same over here, this gap between this part was way too wide for the 17 thou stuff, so I had to find some 24 thou thickness. This piece that's on here is 24 thou, and then this is the 10 thou. I've had this together now and I've mic'd it, and you can see what the mic reads there. Well, hopefully you can see it, but it's 621 thou. So the shaft is 617 and this is 621 now, so it's about 4 thou, 3 to 4 thou clearance. I'm happy with that. And here's the stock I use. This is a piece of roofing metal. This is the 24 inch, and this sheet metal here, I don't know what this is from, but this is 10 thou thick. So that should about do it. I want to show you these the oilers on this thing is pretty cool. See, it has this machine piece here that fits into that hole, and there's a reservoir. You fill that up with oil so that it's up to the level of here, and then all you do is you just put this in. Hard to do with one hand, and there's not enough oil in it. See, it squirts it up into the bearings. When it's full, it'll squish about probably ½ an ounce of it up through that hole while the machine's running. Cool. Plus it has the little oil gallery on top too. So there, that should take care of the bearing issue and the thrust issue now. So yeah, one more thing. When you assemble this, you have to make sure that the bearings, or that the shims are deep enough into the groove so they don't contact the shaft, and it has to be flush here. So I've got them so that they're just slightly smaller, so you can't feel it with your finger. And you can see there's a number 4 stamped onto there, top and bottom, so the bearing goes on the right way. And when you make these shims, you got to make sure that you take all the burrs off. It doesn't really matter if it's totally flat, because when you torque the caps down, it'll crush it flat. But there can't be any burrs, anything that's going to change the tolerances. Okay, headstock's back together again. I got the belt installed, and it turns fairly easy. I'm just turning the pulley by hand. It's not much drag at all. But unfortunately it won't. I thought the weight of the motor would be heavy enough to tension the belt enough, and it works fine on the center speed, but on the big pulley here I'm going to have to add an assist spring for that. You can see my thrust bearing that I made here. Oops, got my finger in the belt. Seems to be working quite well. I've got all these gears assembled now. I got to make a cover for these gears. I'm going to leave this rear cover off for now until I get running. I put the front one on. Okay, let's check the end play on the spindle shaft. See, I've got a jack underneath the spindle shaft and a dial indicator to measure the vertical movement. So now I'm going to jack it up now. It reads 22 thou, so let's see how much clearance I have. Okay, I'm tightening up the jack. 1 thou. Okay, I'm pushing as hard as I can on the vice grips. Okay, we got about 1 3/4 thousandths of an inch of clearance. I'm happy with that. Now we're gonna make the clutch release lever. So I already showed you this part here, the pivot part where the lever is gonna attach to. Now I have this piece of tubing here with a nice bend at the end. I'm gonna weld this onto there somewhere so that it lines up where I want it to be. And then I have these flexi end things. I'm not sure what they're called. They're not Heim ends, but they're similar. Now this one here, I got two of the same. They got nuts with lock bolts on, so I can adjust the length. And this bracket here, it just happens to be a piece of steel that I cut off something else. So this is going to be attached to this bracket so that this pushes up, and then there's going to be this piece of angle iron is going to attach up here like this, and then that other flexi joint's going to go in that hole, and then to slack the belt you have to pull it down like this, and then the weight of the motor pulls it back. So I have this piece of square tubing, or square solid stock, 1/2 inch solid stock, that I'm going to use to connect the two ends. And then I have, what did I do with it? This piece, which is going to be welded onto the bottom section, and it's going to slide up and down. So here's a piece of square tubing slightly bigger than that solid stock, with a nut and a bolt on it to lock it in place. And this is going to be able to slide up and down so that I can get this lined up exactly where I want it. I want to make it so that the lever is pulled towards me, because I'm going to be standing here beside the carriage when I'm running it. So I want to be able to reach and grab the lever and pull it towards me to start the lathe. And then if I get in trouble, then I can just push it away from me to stop it. So let me get some of this tack together and then I'll show you how it looks. Alright, show you how I did this now. Here's the lever, and I welded a bolt on top so I can put a knob at some point. See how I attach this to there? That piece is just tacked on for now. And there's that flex coupler thing there, and this guy here. And then up here we have the other flex couplers attached to this angle iron, which is welded onto the tilt mechanism. Now push this away and it slacks the belt. You let it go and it tightens the belt. Now, it doesn't come out past the chuck because I'm going to be standing here when I'm running it, so I'll be able to get to it easy. Now, while I'm running it, I can just go like that and it'll stop it from turning. See if I can show you how it works here. Okay, it's turning there now. And we're slacking it slowly. Okay, there. See, it slips there. That's where it's starting to slip. It's at about, there's where it's on. Here's where it's just starting to slip. And it's got that much travel. Now this little piece down here, the reason I did it this way is because the distance from the pulleys spreads wider, because the smaller the pulley, the longer the belt has to stretch. So when you put this pulley over here to run the big pulley, this shaft is going to be down here somewhere. So then I have to loosen this bolt and move the shaft down. And also I can monkey around and get this shaft, this lever, exactly where I want it, so it's comfortable. Like if I'm working over here doing something with a steady rest or something, I can adjust that so it comes farther this way. I think it should work. Anyways, I'm going to leave it like this until I get it running, and once I get it running, if I have to make any changes, then I will. And I also repaired this handle here. This was broken, so I tack welded it together and cleaned up the weld.
Sooner or later, love is gonna get you. Sooner or later, girl, you got to give it. Sooner or later, love is gonna let you. Sooner or later, love is gonna win. Just a matter of time before you make up your mind to give all the love that you've been hiding. Just a question of when, told you time and again, till I get all the love you've been denying. Sooner or later, love is gonna let you. Sooner or later, girl, you got to give it. Sooner or later, love is gonna let you. Sooner or later, love is gonna win. Said you'd never be mine, darling, there'll come a time when I'll get all the love that you've been hiding. Just a question of when, I told you time and again, till I taste all the love that you've been buying. Looking for love in all the wrong faces, looking for love in all the wrong faces. Get you, girl, out of this illusion, save your heart from all of this confusion. Sooner or later, love is gonna let you. Sooner or later, girl, you got to give it. Sooner or later, love is gonna let you. Sooner or later, love is gonna win. Love is gonna win. It's just a matter of time before you make up your mind to give all the love that you've been hiding. Just a question of when, told you time and again, till I get all the love you've been denying. Sooner or later, love is gonna let you. Sooner or later, girl, you got to give it. Sooner or later, love is gonna let you. Sooner or later, love is gonna win. All right. Thanks, guys, and we'll see you next week. Take care.